Starting at the top of values morality, the standard is deterring militarism. Prefer my standard because 1, the United States, as mentioned in the resolution, has always been the land of the free. In order to uphold the nation's basic rights guaranteed at independence is fundamental to any other privilege. In this, we have to look to deterring militarism in an effort to prevent infringement on natural rights. With this in mind, we have to look to my standard to uphold. 2nd, we have to look to deterring militarism and its constructs such as police states to allow free-flowing critical thinking and effective dialogue in educational spaces such as this. If we allow the development of police states, the restrictions on educational ground would eliminate crucial stimulating activities such as debate. Now my standard comes first in the round so that we can have academic allotment to this program. And this is an independent voting issues, meaning that if these go conceded throughout the round, the judge can feed the round through my framework, and being ahead on the framework debate is one road to the ballot. The Giroux 2006 proves the growing influence of a military presence and ideology in American society is made visible in part by the fact that the U.S. has more police and weapons than at any other time in history. The state is being radically transformed into a national security state, and major universities intensively court the military establishment. In doing so, become less open to other academic subjects or programs that encourage rigorous debate, dialogue, and critical thinking. Thus, I reserve the right to clarify. We have to look to my standard. Contention 1. Gun laws have been historically racist and targeted to minorities. Articles 2014. Gun control laws have maintained hierarchies of race, gender, disability, nationality, class, and sexuality. Early gun control laws primarily focused on preventing black people, enslaved or free, and Native Americans from arming themselves. Later, gun control focused on disarming immigrants and working class people. The gun control targets black Americans. BAT 09. Gun control in the United States has based on a long history of discrimination. While blacks are the first targets of gun control measures, different racial and ethnic minorities have been targeted over time. And today, the poor now face economic discrimination in many gun control laws. Gun control may be portrayed as a measure to reduce crime. However, gun control implemented before and after the revolution was to keep firearms out of African American hands. Now to contention 2, the police are the ultimate threat with the gun. Banning the private ownership of handguns means the police are the only ones with the weapon. This induces the police state, which is a direct harm. Gun control laws give the police more power and are counterproductive to reducing status quo gun violence. Articles 2014. Laws purportedly about reducing guns and gun violence serve to justify greater use of guns on the part of law enforcement and corrections officers to enforce those laws. An alternative approach to gun control would focus on eliminating the most destructive weapons, those in control of military, law enforcement, and other institutions. Gun control discourse also ignores status quo structural violence, such as police brutality. The Act does nothing about this. Articles 2 proves. Discourse around gun control often fails to acknowledge that most are actually in the hands of government organizations, law enforcement, as well as some business organizations. These cause far more violent deaths than individuals do. These guns would not be restrained at all by current gun control laws and proposals such as the Act. Contention 3. If this ban is implemented, police will just harass people of color. If anything, their private ownership is necessary to combat the real problem, police brutality. Second Amendment right plays a crucial role in protecting minorities. We must embrace the right to protect citizens from structural racism. Control 14. A right to arms played an important role in mitigating racial violence during the Jim Crow era and providing the physical protection that enabled the voter registration efforts and other activities of civil rights workers. These examples should be seen as case studies in the need for vulnerable minorities to have the means of self-defense. Winker 2011. Only tangible outcome of the civil rights movement had been more violence and oppression, much of it committed by the very entity meant to protect the public, the police. The gun is the only thing that will free us and gain us our liberation. The self-defense of the oppressed is necessary to challenge the police and the state. William 62. When an oppressed people defend themselves, the enemy is more willing to grant concessions. Racists are more vicious and violent. Self-defense endangers the oppressors, and authorities suddenly enforce law and order when previously complacent towards racist violence. And so now, on to the AF. So starting at the top of the flow, we can see that actually turned his util on value criterion against morality because util does not treat people like moral agents. It treats people like products, as means to an end. It doesn't actually respect their morality. It doesn't respect them as moral agents because they're just values. They're just products within the system as a means to an end. So turn his value criterion against his value. And even if you don't buy that, by the fact that utilitarianism doesn't even ensure equal well-being to its participants. Alexander L. Mill. An ethical construct that denies any absolute categorical values is questionable. The welfare of all human beings would not be considered an unconditional value. To illustrate, consider the use of a child or forced labor by multinational firms operating in emerging markets would be permissible as long as the greatest amount of good is achieved for the largest number of people. Virtually any means to attain this end would be appropriate under utilitarianism, and consequently it verifies various injustices such as discrimination would be allowed. Fundamentally, the utilitarian argument concentrates too much on increasing production and too little on equitable outcome distribution. So therefore, we can see that it doesn't actually respect these people and how it does. It doesn't actually maximize well-being, so turn that against him. Okay, so down to Rawls. First of all, Rawls' conception of personal freedom cannot resolve utilitarian democratic ideals. So even if you don't buy the two arguments I made against util, buy this card by Taylor, 2003. Rawls asserts that his conception of the program as free is equal, essential to the democratic ideal. This idea is in competition with other democratic ideas. However, the idea of the common good as is understood by people, as well as with other interpretations of the same idea. Fairness to be a necessary condition then for justice, as fairness to the focus of an overlapping consensus would be adherence for all reasonable comprehensive doctrines to endorse this idea, more central to the democratic ideal than any other fundamental ideas. And so I turn to the util and the value and the roles. Down to convention 1, turn his point about handguns causing suicide because they actively can switch to deadlier weapons. One of his justifications for the DePhillips card was that the alt is less lethal. However, the alt also isn't like restricted to knives. It's also including shotguns, long guns, and other more deadly weapons. So we can see that it doesn't actually decrease suicide. You're not actually maximizing well-being. You have no impacts coming out of the AC under that. Also, to turn the condition 2, and that handguns are key to intimate partner violence with the same idea. They will switch to deadlier weapons. Just because we take away the so-called main form of the status quo doesn't mean that it will change in the future. Act does not actually have access to these impacts that he claims are coming out of the AC. And he concedes that he does nothing for mental health, therefore he doesn't access any impacts of the mental health or the suicide impacts. And then so down, also he says that yes, they do have a criminal record, the perpetrators of IPV, so we can see that background checks can solve this, because background checks can actually take out people with criminal records that are perpetuating this internal partner violence. And so we can see that we don't even have to affirm. Down to condition 3, turn that because Procon 91 proves the General Accounting Office showed that 100% of the shootings that occurred with children under the age of 6 shows that could be solved with just child-proof safety laws. And so the fact is that we don't actually have to affirm. We can just use child-proof safety laws. That argument isn't actually accessing any offense. And also turn his increase in gun culture, because you increase the gun culture by inducing a police state, by banning the private ownership of handguns. You're actually inducing a police state, which actually re-entrenches gun culture. Turn his Australia example, because that's not comparable. The demographics of the U.S. are different. Increase in crime is definitely what's going to happen under this gun ban. Compel 93 proves several reasons though you have to negate.
First, on your criterion of militarism, you say that militarism hinders effective dialogue. Why doesn't, death, like the greatest form of exclusion, hinder, education because they're dead? Why does militarism outweigh death?
Why is militarism? Because militarism causes death, like one of the harms.
Wait, so it all just ends back to death, right?
One of the harms of militarism is death. But militarism is the root cause
of death. You're saying militarism is the root cause of death. Okay. And specifically on your first contention, you say that like gun laws are racist. What's the warrant behind this?
Okay, Article 2014 says that they maintained hierarchies in the past, and Babat 09 says that it targets Black Americans. The example would be like when the KKK and other white armed militias were present during the Reagan administration. They said nothing, but as soon. Okay.
So you say specifically like these government authorities are the ones that are using their existing prejudice to enforce the laws?
Yes.
Wait, so wouldn't a buyback program solve for that, since the government is just buying back guns? No need for enforcement, no need for stop and frisk.
What? No, the buyback program is still a form of the gun ban. The argument is that the gun ban actually is what allows them to.
Wait, but you just said it's the enforcement mechanism that police officers use.
The private ownership ban is what perpetuates.
Why specifically is the policy bad?
Why
as
is
opposed
the policy
to
bad?
the enforcement of the policy.
We've seen that it's actually allowed people to criminalize the minorities and such as stop and frisk and other problems.
Wait, the stop and frisk, police suppression, that's enforcement of the policy. If I choose a different way to enforce the policy, I
can't do that because you already read your AC, so you can't shift your position.
I never specified enforcement. I could just
you never specified enforcement. You can't do that in the 1 AR out of nowhere.
The Donahue card says that Australia implemented a buyback program.
And I turned the Australia implement because I said that there was no demographics. Okay. What's your question?
So if I win a buyback program, then that solves for all of your enforcement impacts, right?
Actually, it doesn't, because you can't shift topical advocacies.
So, but if I win it, if I'm allowed to do that,
you can't even make the
okay, just answer the question, yes or no.
And no, you don't.
Why not?
Because of the fact that buyback programs don't solve.
Why not?
You can make the argument.
No, I'm asking why don't buyback programs solve?
Buyback programs don't solve because the idea is that we're still inducing this private ownership ban. That's the harm. Is that the
Wait,
police
you just said that the police enforcing policy is the harm, not like just the lack of private ownership.
The whole idea of the banning of private ownership is bad because it induces the police state.
So where specifically do you solve for in-home violence?
Where do I solve for in-home violence? The argument isn't that I solve for in-home violence. The argument is that app actually perpetuates it because you can see that they switched deadly weapons, and that was a direct turn to maximum.
Now, I can make the argument, those affected by in-home violence can constitute a marginalized group. Does that mean that I can work on your framework?
Does that mean you can work under my framework?
Yeah.
Of deterring militarism?
Yeah.
No.
Why not?
Because the framework is deterring militarism, deterring things such as police states and oppressive structures and state power.
Why specifically? Okay. Before I start, could I look at those justifications for your framework?